is a beautiful city, made up really of its diversity. I think it's a very working class character that really defines the spirit of Oakland. We have, folks ever since the beginning of the town who are, entrepreneurs and hustlers and, people who are, just trying to realize their dreams. We have a lot of dreamers here in Oakland. But I think the mishmash of cultures and people is really what makes Oakland special, and the people of Oakland are really what Oakland is, right? Like, people talk to each other, people say hello on the street, right? It feels like a town, even though we're over 400,000 people. It feels like the town. That's why we call it the town. Yeah, so we definitely have this continued battle for land and power, basically, is what's going on in Oakland, downtown Oakland right now. We have, Chinatown, for example, has been displaced for, over and over and over for the last 140 years, right? And so you have this constant battle between, who has a right to be here in the center of the city. And so, now that developers and businesses and corporations finally want to be here and invest in Oakland, you have the people who've been here for hella long, who've created the city, the working class of the city, now fighting just to stay and to be a part of the Renaissance. So I think that downtown Oakland can be a place for everybody, but only if we're really intentional and only if we have equitable policies that are making sure that working class families can stay here, meaning that we have to have affordable housing and we have to make sure that we have affordable retail spaces for our small businesses to thrive. So I believe that it's possible to have, both newcomers and businesses, and the longtime Oaklanders who have been here, but it has to be very, very intentional, and it has to be very inclusive, and we have to be mindful at every step of the way to make sure we're including longtime residents. So, my vision is that, the economy can lift all boats, right? I think it's possible. Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about equity right now in Oakland, and for me, part of it is about addressing the inequities of the past, right? You have to acknowledge what has happened in Oakland's history, right? And so part of that history, as I mentioned, Chinatown has been displaced. West Oakland has been displaced, right? The highways moved right through our communities, destroying a lot of our businesses and agencies and homes and affordable homes, right? And then you had, a long time where our families, as families of color, couldn't buy land, right? You had a long time, you had 60 years where Chinese families weren't citizens, and so we couldn't buy land, right? You had a long time where there were covenants in housing all across Oakland that only white families could own land, right? So there's a very real history of access to land, access to housing here that we have to acknowledge in our planning, right? And that's part of equity, is making, making that whole and making up for, these inequitable policies that have existed for so long. One of the most important things that I think we need right now in Oakland is for communities of color, low-income communities, to actually have a seat at the table when you talk about planning, right? There are no community requirements for community engagement in any of the planning processes right now. The planning department doesn't have any requirements. Developers don't have any requirements. That means when developers come into our neighborhoods, we have to force them to talk to us, right? And that shouldn't be the case. In progressive cities across the country, you have actual processes that require community engagement, that require community benefits, that require equitable policies that are making sure that our small businesses don't get displaced, that are making sure that there is affordable housing in new development. Oakland doesn't have any of that right now. And that's a huge problem. That's why we're seeing massive displacement, whereas in other progressive cities, you see less of that, right? That means that we have to overturn Costa-Hawkins. We have to overturn these laws that are barriers to requiring affordable housing, right? Some of the developers, lobbyists here in Oakland were the ones who wrote Costa-Hawkins and made it impossible for us to pass inclusionary housing, right? So we have to overturn that. We have to pass inclusionary housing. We have to protect our cultural districts, right? So when we talk about culture and race and economics, our cultural districts like Chinatown and the Black Arts District are at the heart of our local economies, right? So we're downtown, we're right next to where all the development's happening. And so if you don't have something to protect those communities, we could disappear, because I've seen it in other cities. It's happened, But if you look at San Francisco Chinatown, it is protected because they have zoning protections. They actually protect the small businesses there so that the downtown and techies don't take over San Francisco Chinatown, right? We don't have that in Oakland, and we need to take really bold action in the next year to make sure that that actually happens. Otherwise, we could face the disappearance of our neighborhoods, of our cultural districts that make Oakland what it is.